Hello and welcome all to today's Independent Food Systems dialogue on transforming food systems with aquatic foods, advancing equitable livelihoods for healthy people and the planet. We will be focusing on game-changing solutions that can be included in the summit's action track number 4 on driving equitable and inclusive livelihood outcomes for all. My name is Nicole Frank. I lead the Equitable Livelihoods team of the Fisheries division at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, and I will be moderating this event. We already have about 69 people joining us, and it's quickly running up, this number. So it's great to have so many joining us virtually from around the world. And while we wait for more of you to join us, allow me to direct your attention to some housekeeping rules that are showing on your screens right now. So firstly, for audience members, your cameras and microphones will be switched off by default. We will have a round of Q&A sessions with the panels, so I invite you to submit your questions via the Q&A box. You can find the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Also, to keep the webinar as engaging as possible, we also welcome you to send any comments via the chat box in your control panel. Note that this event is recorded and screenshots will be taken for promotion purposes, and we invite you also to subscribe to WorldFish's newsletter to receive the event recording and also some other post-event materials. And the link to subscribe to that newsletter can be found in the chat of the event now. Throughout the webinar, we will also be launching a few audience polls for you all to take part in. So whenever that happens, a window will pop up on your screen with a list of questions and answers for you to engage with. So please participate. I will now pass the floor to Dr. Stineke Unema, who is the Executive Secretary of the United Nations Nutrition and a member of the Norwegian leadership of the Global Action Network, to give a quick introduction to this webinar. Stineke, over to you, please.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and good day to all. Glad you all could join today. Indeed, my name is Stineke Unema, and I am the Executive Secretary of UN Nutrition. And on behalf of the Global Action Network, I wish you all a warm welcome. UN Nutrition is engaging in the Global Action Network on sustainable food from the oceans and inland waters for food security and nutrition, which is initiated by Norway under the UN Decade of Action on Nutrition. The mission of this network is to mobilize actions to include aquatic foods as key food sources for achieving food security and improved nutrition. Aquatic foods are an important part of transforming our global food systems. Arguments for this are presented in our UN Nutrition discussion paper, Role of Aquatic Foods in Sustainable Healthy Diets. The network is arranging a series of 3 independent dialogues that feed into the UN Food Systems Summit, highlighting this importance of aquatic foods. The series shows solutions and how to scale these up and how to connect research and policy. This one is the 3rd dialogue arranged by the network. The previous 2 dialogues were connected to the summit's action track number 1, access to safe and nutritious food for all, and number 3, boost nature positive production. And today we will focus on action track number 4, advance equitable livelihoods. The paper I just mentioned from UN Nutrition shows that many rural poor are engaged in small-scale fishing and aquaculture activities, and these aquatic foods, such as small fishes, lower trophic species, are the most culturally acceptable, accessible, and affordable nutrient-rich food. So read that paper. I'm sure you will hear much more details and important insights from our panelists today. We are very lucky to have Ms. Nicole Frans, Fishery Planning Analyst at FAO, as our moderator today, and she will guide us through the event. Thanks again for joining, and I wish all of us a very good session. Nicole, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stineke, for this brief introduction. And before we begin the session now, let us first get to know you a little bit better in the audience. And we will therefore launch a poll with a question where you're joining us from today. So it should appear on your screen now. You will see the first question is, where are you joining us from today? So please click on your region. And the second question is, what type of organization do you work for? So I invite you to please choose whether you're from government, whether you're from an NGO, non-for-profit organization, the private sector, academia and research, or any other constituency that you're representing. So I see we still have some people joining as we speak. So we also want to give everybody a chance to connect and to answer these questions. I'm going to wait a little bit longer. My colleagues can also see how many people have already voted. So if we have a good critical mass who has answered the questions of where they're joining us from today, the type of organizations. And I see also a comment that IGOs should also be in that. So I see the poll has finished. So can we see the outcomes? Here are the outcomes. Excellent. We see we have quite a number of people joining us from Europe. We always have a time zone constraint in these webinars, obviously, but I also see that we have a lot of people from Asia and the Pacific. This is the area of fisheries is most important also in terms of absolute numbers of people involved in the sector. So it's great that you're here. But we also have the others, a lower participation from Central Latin America, but again, I think that's mostly related to the time zone issue. We have a lot of researchers attending, and I think this is very, very given the topic also that we are going to discuss today also on the role of science and research. But we also have a lot of other stakeholders here, from government, from the NGOs, from the private sector and others. So we have a good mixed group with different perspectives. Excellent. Thank you very much. So we thank you again for participating in this poll, and we look forward to hear from all your different perspectives. So please make good use of the Q&A function and of the chat box. I would now like to turn our attention to our high-level opening speech that will be delivered by Lele Lelaulu. He is chairman of the Earth Council Alliance. He is a development entrepreneur working at the intersection of climate change, tourism, food security, and renewable energy. He leads several NGOs and humanitarian agencies in the Pacific, including the Oceania Sustainable Tourism Alliance. Lele, over to you for the opening high-level speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicole, and welcome to everybody here. And great initiative, and I'm pleased and proud to be part of it. But I've only got 6 minutes, so I better get on with the rest of it. Why can a single fish in Tokyo fetch over $1 million while canned fish producers pay more for the cans than the sums they pay to islanders for the fish? We would cut a lot of wastage if all fish was sold at the price of sushi and sashimi. Besides, why are people who don't like the taste and smell of fish being catered to? That's why we have huge marketing campaigns calling it tuna chicken of the sea, which is why so much fish has been dragged and wasted and sort of decolorized and de-tasted from the oceans of the world. Instead of eating chicken of the sea, let's just let them eat chicken and save the marine resources for those who really need them and who want them. Now, the thing is true that, you can collect all the scientific data you like, but it will be of limited use if you do not incorporate indigenous knowledge accumulated over the centuries. Let me tell you how indigenous knowledge can save money for exogenous investors while rebuilding and conserving fish stocks and reefs. In Fiji, an exclusive island resort was losing guests and facing ruin as its sandy beach eroded into a rocky, unfriendly coastline. nothing suggested by the scientists worked until they started talking to the local islanders through an NGO and Counterpart International, whose coral gardener, Austin Bowden Kirby, collected the information from the locals to find out how it is that beaches were disappearing, as were the fish. And of course, the revenue for tourism for the local governments. The old folk told them where the currents used to flow, what fish were in different parts of the reef, and how the lagoon had changed. It transpired that the tidal patterns were altered when the resort replaced an old wooden bridge with a fancy concrete causeway. The resort did as the indigenous people suggested, and they ripped out the concrete causeway and built a bridge which allowed the free movement of the tidal waters. And of course, this brought back the schools of fish which fed the islanders, and the resort benefited enormously when the parrotfish returned and resumed cleaning the coral reef. The excrement, of course, of a parrotfish was sand. So not only did they revive a dying coral reef, but they also rebuilt sandy beaches, which are essential for healthy tourism. Yes, the parrotfish turned shit into sand, which is why you should never eat parrotfish. With the restored coral reef and its sandy beach, the expensive resort got its guests back and employed more indigenous people at the resort. So it was good for everybody economically. But they were also able to ensure the fish stocks in that region were sustained and not overfished. How did they do that? They interspersed no fishing zones with fishing zones. They placed taboos on the no fishing zones. You know, taboo is a word that comes from the Pacific. So with these taboos, they interspersed them with open fishing areas, and these were jointly policed by the resort and the indigenous fishermen. You know, the fishermen really liked it because you could see quite clearly that a lot more fish was coming into the fishing zone from the no fishing zone, because as we know, coral reefs are fish houses and they were allowed to develop and expand. And this is why, you know, a lot of these sort of external businesses and enterprises can directly affect adversely the importance of food security as well as economic security for indigenous people, especially in islands so far away from the centers of commerce. The thing is that tourism for most islands is the biggest economic driver. And tourism, if you think about it as a development person, tourism for me is the largest voluntary transfer of resources from the haves to the have-nots in history. Voluntary. Think of the hundreds of millions of lives which were lost because people were trying to protect their resources or their wealth, or people trying to take it away to sustain their own community. So tourism is very, very important. So the connection between tourism, food security, and conservation of the environment is key for island peoples. Especially too, as you know, we talk about sustainability, durability, etc. But small islanders can see very clearly what sustainability is because they can see the end of the resources. It's at the beach or at the coast. They see this every day, so they're conscious of the importance of retaining the resources by being sustainable. Anyway, these colonial vestiges, which take away the voice of the indigenous people, have to be changed if we're going to get anywhere near food security for small islands and also protection of the fish species, which are disappearing rapidly, as we all know. Now, you know, imagine the sort of connections that could be made between people from the Pacific and Indian Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean if they're allowed to discuss how certain patterns emerge or disappear over the oceans. And now my time is running out, so just a quick note on recreational fishing, which hasn't appeared on the program here. Now, the World Bank has estimated that capture fishing, commercial fishing, the economic benefit to local communities is about $21 per pound. That's per pound, $21 economic benefit. However, for recreational fishing, the economic benefits to a local community is $624 per pound. $624 per pound versus commercial fishing, $21 per pound. Now, just imagine if we could link up all the fish, build and link commercial recreational fishing routes throughout the world to provide the locals with income because they've been overfished because of the distant water nations, but this allows them to slowly build up an economic base again and also provide fish for their local inhabitants. Now, I'll end it there, but of course I'll take questions later. And thank you again. This is just a voice from the importance of the indigenous in dealing with the issues of overfishing and retaining sustainability in small island developing states. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lele. Fascinating examples from a region for which the ocean plays such an important role. And thanks also for reminding us that science and knowledge need to include indigenous and traditional knowledge, because these users of the resources, they're interacting every day with the ecosystems. They know how they function, and their livelihoods depend directly on them. So we need to learn to listen to these small-scale producers, including the indigenous peoples. And we also need to very carefully consider the impact of investments and how they impact those livelihoods if we really strive for sustainable aquatic food systems. Thank you very much again. Now, before we move on to the main dialogue event with our panel speakers, I would like to launch another audience poll. And I'm asking my colleagues to launch it. And the question is, what would be the most significant gain if we make the role of aquatic foods more visible in the food systems agenda? And you have a number of options here that relate also directly to some of the SDG targets, as you can see. So please choose what you think would be the most significant gain to really include aquatic foods in the food systems agenda. We now have 142 people in this event, which is great. So I invite all of you to make your choice. And I ask my colleagues to close the poll when we have a good number of participants who've submitted their choice. Okay. There's quite a strong preference that the inclusion of aquatic foods in the food systems agenda would contribute much more to the integration of aquatic foods in a balanced food system, no? For improved food and nutrition security within the planetary boundaries. So it makes sense because it relates also directly to SDGs 2 on food security, 12 and 14. But this is closely followed in relation to the importance for reducing hunger, nutrition security and well-being. And I hope that the event today will contribute to share more learning around that importance of the aquatic food systems in relation to reduced hunger and improved food and security, food and nutrition security. Thank you, colleagues, for screening that poll. We will now start the first discussion on key solutions that are needed for transforming food systems with aquatic foods in line with the main mission of Action Track 4, which aims to advance equitable livelihoods of those dependent on aquatic food systems. And then we will discuss ways to build the capacity and facilitate the transfer of skills and knowledge. Our first panel today is made up of food systems experts working in policy and research and civil society from around the world. In this session, each speaker will discuss some of their own initiatives, which are having impact and can be included as part of key solutions in scaling up sustainable food production in low and middle income countries. After that, we will have a Q&A session with these speakers. So please take advantage of the function of the Q&A function on the screen to submit your questions that you would like the panelists to answer. With this, I would like to start this panel with Benson Obwanga, who is a lecturer and researcher in aquatic ecology at the Laikipia University College in Kenya. His research focuses on the sustainable production of fish feed and exploring innovative ways to connect sustainable aquaculture with accessible markets for improved food security. Benson, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Nicole. My name's Benson Obwanga. I work at Laikipia University and Egerton University in Kenya. My colleagues and I have been able to do something extraordinary by listening to the change makers and connecting the change makers. We were able to establish a fish food system linking a rural area to Kibera, one of the largest slums in Africa. 70% of the fish that was being produced, farmed, was not available to was not good for the high-end market. So we were able to make this fish, which is proteinous, and nutritious, available to the Kibera slum. At the moment, every week, on a weekly basis, 1 ton of fish is delivered to Kibera. Based on this successful food system case, the local change makers have been able to scale up the approach. Please watch the video that is going to play next.
A new fish value chain has been established to bring undersized fish from Nyeri to Kibra. The first delivery was made on 11th August 2020. 1 ton of fish has been delivered to Kibra from Nyeri every week since then. Kibra has a problem of lack of affordable fish to consumers who are in deficit of protein. Fish farmers in Nyeri are faced with lack of market for small-sized fish, which accounts for 70% of the production volume of the Nyeri farmers.
Hapo awali tulikuwa na shida kupata soko ya samaki, and hiyo ilikuwa one of the challenges we were facing as farmers.
Since August 2020, 1 ton of additional fish has been supplied weekly to the slum of Kibera, giving the urban poor access to affordable nutritious protein. This did not just happen. Applying a food system approach in our research, we were able to develop governance structures that empower the local change makers to ensure long-term scalability. By using the food system approach, fish produced in the rural area of Nyeri was connected to Kibera, the largest slum in Nairobi. Our food system approach gives an overview of different roles and activities in food system networks. We started by listening to the needs of different stakeholders to develop scalability of aquatic nutritious fish food system together. Local empowerment has resulted in tremendous impacts. Change makers do not work in isolation but within networks of different actors in order to obtain impact. Let's listen to the local change makers involved in a new rural urban food system that we developed together.
Kibra came from the name Kebera. Kibra means jungle. Long time ago, this place was full of trees. So people started coming in, they destroyed the trees. But nowadays, it's no longer the jungle, it's desert.
Natoka sehemu za Butula, niko na watoto 6 na niko na wajukuu 4. Huyu ndio mjukuu mdogo, na nilikuwa naishi maisha ya nyumbani na nikakuja Nairobi. Ndio nikaingia kwa biashara, nikaanza biashara ya samaki. Kuna mama mmoja akaniambia kuna mtu mwenye analeta samaki, wacha nikuunganishe pamoja na yeye, tukue tunaletewa mzigo wetu wa samaki. Kasema hapo ni poa. Tukaanza hivyo. Sasa tunaongea huko, wanatuwekea mzigo, samaki wanatuletea mzigo wetu. Hapa ninaanza kuuza.
When we met during the 3R Kenya meeting, we found an opportunity because Kibera was offering a market for the fish that is found here in Nyeri. Kibera had a challenge of getting sufficient fish supply from the beginning of the COVID time. The fish that was coming from the traditional source stemming from Lake Victoria was very limited. Therefore, the small-sized pond farmed fish from Nyeri is filling that gap.
As shown in the film, we have illustrated it's possible to connect a previously unconnected rural area with an urban slum. Our strategy can combat hunger by upscaling nutritious supply of affordable fish to the most vulnerable and ensure sustainable livelihood. Kibera is one of the largest slums in Africa with about 700,000 people. The demand for affordable protein found in fish is high and increasing, while rural areas can increase supply of affordable fish. For scalability to happen, a food system approach must be applied to connect, analyze, match solutions with the most urgent needs, and support stakeholders and local change makers to make steps forward.
Benson for sharing this very inspiring video about this initiative that is really applying the food systems approach to reach the most vulnerable. So thank you very much for sharing this concrete example. Now let's move on to our second speaker, Amy Atta, who is a senior research scientist at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, also known as CSIR. Amy's research is market-oriented to food and nutrition security and food safety in Africa. As part of her work, she helps to develop the innovative integration of small fish in African food systems for improved nutrition. Amy, the next 5 minutes are yours, please.
So, greetings to all of you. I'm Amy, as Nicole said. I'm here to share with you some experience from the Small Fish Food Project on how we attempted to strengthen women's livelihood through market innovation. So in Ghana, sun drying of small fish is mostly carried out. It's mostly carried out on the bare ground. As you can see, the fish is purchased and then we use the seawater to wash it. And then it's sprinkled on the bare ground to dry. And after 2-3 days, depending on the intensity of the sun, when it's dried, it is swept together in a heap, as you see this way, collected, it's sieved off the sand, and then packaged in baskets as we have it here. And then it's transported to the markets to have it displayed in this form for sale. And because of this process, we realized that it's actually accounted for its low appeal and then consumption by most middle and upper class consumers. So what the Small Fish Food Projects introduced was to introduce simple hygienic handling of the fish, where they follow simple hygienic practices to have the fish properly washed in potable water that has some salt solution, salt concentration, just like the seawater they use. And then we also introduced drying on the racks. These are mosquito netted racks on raised platforms to improve on its safety and then quality. These racks can actually be flipped over, as you can see the women doing here, so that you have minimum contact with the fish and also reduce contamination. For us, these platforms have been constructed in about 4 different communities where they are trying to use these racks. And these have been done in different regions in Ghana. So we realized that diversification of usage of the small dried fish was very important, and also the alternative livelihood by adding value to the sun-dried fish was identified for these women. And what we did was to train these women on how to improve on the packaging by deheading, degutting the fish and packaging it in simple polyclean bags or other packaging materials which are sealed and hygienically presented. We also trained them on how to use hammer mill to actually mill the fish, the degutted and deheaded fish into powder, fish powder. So trainings were held for them, and the fish powder was used in producing different type of fish products, different formulations where fish fortification was used. So you can see here we have donuts, we have waffles, we have biscuits, which all have small fish in them. We also have this pepper sauce, which is very common. We call the shito in Ghana. We also introduced the use of fish powder, that the male fish powder, for fortification in children's porridges and any other food children will be taking, just to improve the nutritional content of the fish. So to encourage these women, we tried for the women groupings, we tried to donate a hammer mill as well as a sealer to these women groupings to encourage them to use this. But then despite these efforts, we realized that there were still challenges hampering the promotion and then the production of hygienic fish and to allowing them break into formal markets. And these women, unfortunately, have this mindset that the ground drying was better than the platform drying in terms of appearance and then the stress they have to go through. And then we also realized that they had issues with land allocation for erecting the raised platforms. We know that most women do not own land in Africa, so it is the men who own land. And immediately it is a bare ground and it is being used, there's no issue about attaching any costs for its usage. But immediately they know that it's going to be used for raised platforms, then they start demanding money. So that has also been an issue. And then the issue of self-ownership mentality by the women, where they all want to own their own platforms for usage. We also realized that low demand for safer and quality fish in informal markets was also a problem due to the high price. Because then if normal fish, ground dried fish is selling for 1 cedi, they expect the same, customers expect to buy the same for a quality fish or a more hygienically processed fish. So that is also a problem. And then we also realized that there was no ready markets or uptakers who will just buy from these women and then upscale it. We also realized that there was costly and then cumbersome registration process as far as the regulatory agencies are concerned in terms of cost for analysis, cost for registration of the product. So the small scale fish, the small fish projects realized that these are things that to move forward with this agenda, there was a lot of efforts needed to remove all the bottlenecks that are associated with hygienic and small fish production in Ghana. And these must involve governments and other regulatory agencies and all those that matter in enforcing its usage or hygienic drying. There's also the need to intensify awareness on the nutritional value of small fish to boost its consumption for food security. This will also alleviate malnutrition in most developing countries if we do it, and then also to cater for the rural poor. So for small fish, we believe that whether it's being hygienically done or not hygienically done, the issue is that there should be that education to let people know the value of small fish and then push it forward, push this agenda forward, where people will take it up, whether eaten whole or used in different food fortification, so that we can have improved nutrition, because small fish is actually a complete food. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for this contribution, for this experience from Ghana, Amy, and the importance to acknowledge how the nutritional value of small fish can be improved, including also that there are some challenges that remain to be addressed. Hopefully we can talk more about that later in the session. Our final speaker is Dr. Emma Wittboy, who is a project manager of the United Nations Development Programme's Nordic Representations Office Blue Justice Initiative project. Emma supports a Blue Justice Initiative through its operations in support of the International Declaration Against Transnational Organized Crime in the Global Fishing Industry, the Copenhagen Declaration, in selected developing countries. Please welcome to the virtual floor, Emma. The floor is yours for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Nicole. So I'm going to be moving away now from the specific local examples that were really, really interesting to speaking more specifically on the issue of governance. So as we all know, for the citizens of large ocean nations, the blue economy is really central to advancing sustainable and equitable livelihoods and food security for all. But the realization of a free and a fair blue economy is threatened by the existence of a blue shadow economy, which diverts the revenue away from the coastal states into the pockets of criminal networks, which are operating, amongst others, in the marine fisheries sector. And these networks engage in what is often referred to as fisheries crime, which takes place throughout the value and supply chain and negatively affects coastal states, particularly developing countries. Now, the types of crimes that are engaged in are various, but to start with the perhaps most disturbing, we have human trafficking, which has increasingly been exposed in the public domain via the media over the last few years. There's also document fraud in the form of illegal fishing licenses or catch landing documents. There's corruption, money laundering, mislabeling of fish, fish fraud, customs fraud, and of course also illegal fishing. Now the question is, what is being done about fisheries crime? Now politically, at a global level, there's increasing recognition of the problem and the urgent need to address this cooperatively. The Copenhagen Declaration on Transnational Organized Crime in the Global Fishing Industry is a unique showcasing of the political will to deal with this issue. And the most recent country that has joined has been Ecuador, which brings the total number of supporting countries to 36. And there are many small island developing states that support this declaration as well. And in the upcoming months, many of the states from the CARICOM region will be joining too. Now, the declaration emphasizes the importance of cooperation to deal with fisheries crime. That's within governments, between institutions, but also between governments, so cross-border. And of course, the question is, how can this cooperation be actioned at a practical level, particularly in countries that have limited resources and capacity? So here, relevant is the Norwegian government's Blue Justice Initiative. This responds to the specific needs of developing countries in addressing fisheries crime. And it supports a number of projects. One of these projects is the United Nations Development Programme's Blue Resilience Project. And this project focuses very specifically on supporting improved cooperation between government institutions in addressing fisheries crime. And this is towards realizing a number of key UN SDGs. Now, the slide I'm bringing up now is the value chain flowchart. And what you can see there is that there is potentially a large number of different government institutions along the value and supply chain that need to effectively work with one another, enable to identify and then investigate and deal with fisheries crime. So of course, the question that is asked is, how can these institutions be supported in most effectively working together? So here the UNDP's Blue Resilience Project is devising what we call a learning package for developing countries to support this cooperation. And it's based on empirical research that we've engaged in over the last half year or so. The research has obviously highlighted a number of findings, but just to emphasize two important points. The first is that the way these institutions work together in different countries is highly country and context specific. There's no one template that is suited to all countries and contexts, and that's very important. And another very important point is that the different success factors or challenges, if they're not there, some of these factors are relatively expected: resources, pre-approval systems, etc. But there's others that are, for us, were less expected, and they're more, I would say, personal in nature: trust, ownership, transparency, accountability, and then gendered elements. So cultural and traditional barriers, the gendered gap in positions and wages, etc. So this led us to realize this learning package we are creating, it needs to be rooted in a systems-based approach, and it needs to be supporting recipient countries in self-understanding of cooperation challenges and self-identification of needs and the type of support that is required to meet these needs. Now, as I said already, we're not just focusing, the importance is not just cooperation internally within governments, but also between governments, cross-border. And what we have here is an innovative digital tool that fosters this cooperation. And this is the secure online platform known as the Blue Justice Community. It's a Blue Justice Initiative tool that is being administered by the UNDP. And what it does is it enables government users to seek expert peer-to-peer advice, to draw on curated e-learning resources and material, and also to share ideas with other colleagues globally around addressing fisheries crime. And the user country representatives currently that are using this platform include Fiji, Philippines, South Africa, Brazil, etc. And the learning package that UNDP is developing will be available through this platform. This last slide is just to illustrate to you, we had a scoping workshop that we held earlier in the year in Fiji, and this was the first time actually that the Blue Justice community was technically put to test, and it was within the context of a scoping exercise to ascertain the institutional cooperation needs around addressing fisheries crime. So the question is, where do we go now? How are we moving forwards? The Blue Resilience Project will now begin to be piloting its learning package in identified developing countries, and then will systematically roll out over the next 18 or so months. And the Blue Justice community will be seeking to expand its user base, but also importantly, of course, its user activity, its interaction. And combined, this will promote cooperation to better address fisheries crime, which supports securing this food security and safety for all that we are focusing on here.
A lot. It's impressive to learn about these fisheries crimes, and it's definitely something that needs to be addressed in order to advance equitable livelihoods and aquatic food systems. So I take the opportunity to thank all of the speakers of the first panel for your very valuable insights and very practical examples from around the world. We are a little bit behind schedule and time, but I would like to take the opportunity to have a quick kind of Q&A for our speakers of this first session. And we see that there are questions coming in. We see that our panelists are already typing away to answer them. So I'm just going to put out one question to each of you panelists, asking to have really a short, concise statement on that. So just like a take-home message, building on what you have already said. So let me start maybe with Benson again. You spoke about the food systems approach. So in your view, what is needed to expand this approach to other areas, to other regions? What would be your key message for that, please?
Our key message is that a food system approach does not just happen. We need to do an analysis. We need to identify the change makers and work with them, and then also again support them so that and then ensure connectivity. For instance, for us, we had to work with the community leads. So in the rural area and in the urban area in the slum. So we connected them, and that's why it was able to happen. And we also wanted to look at the quick fix issues, looking at the urgent issues, which we are able to sort out first. And then now these other things will fall in place. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, Benson. These connecting functions are really fundamental. I think we all need to learn about that more and see how we can apply it. Amy, a question for you. You spoke about the importance of small fish, but how can we raise the awareness on the importance of small-scale fish consumption even more with those who need to make decisions?
Okay, so like you said, small fish for us is a complete food. So there's a need to actually let people know the essence and then the benefits of consuming small fish. Every part of small fish contain lots of micronutrients, which are issues in Africa, for example. So then stakeholders need to know this to drive this home. And it could be a policy where we have national school feeding programs where it can be incorporated into the school feeding program for all children to have access to fish. There could actually be a fish day, there could be a fish week where small fish is promoted, where it could be used in different meals, displayed to people, actually enhance the presentation, and then with awareness, education on the radio, television, in drama forms, in the various communities, because there are some fishing communities where fish is so abundant, but you don't have them consuming. And then you have children having malnutrition issues. So there's a need for policymakers to go down and consult, have interactions with these women, with the communities, and everybody to know the essence. Here we have small fish being only consumed by the rural poor. But then there are people who are rich who will not consume small fish, go for the bigger fish. But in actual sense, small fish is actually a complete food. So there's a need to actually promote this on the national level and have uptakers coming on board to actually enhance the form it is presented so that more people can go into consumption of small fish. That is what I think.
Thanks a lot, Amy. And yes, I guess educating on the nutritional value and the different forms and benefits of its consumption at all levels is fundamental. Thanks for sharing that. Then a last quick statement. Emma, you spoke a lot about already what needs to be done, but how can fisheries crimes be dealt with at a practical level, particularly in countries with limited resources and capacity?
Thank you. Thanks for letting me talk again after taking up so much time there. I think the first part of my answer would be that developing states need to work with what they've got. There is human resources, there's whatever technical resources, operational resources within the laws that they've got. Because if you're dealing with fisheries crime, you do have some kind of criminal laws also in your country. And so it's a matter of using what you've got and then using it most effectively. But of course, the crux here, I think, is that you can only really use what you've got most effectively if you understand what fisheries crime is. And if you understand how to identify it, and if you have some kind of assessment or baseline of the fisheries crime problems that you are dealing with in your country and within your region. So in that regard, I would say it is valuable to reach out, for example, to the Blue Justice Initiative Secretariat, to our project, and to engage in considering becoming part of the support that is offered there, because it is through, as I mentioned, it's through joining, for example, the Copenhagen Declaration. You are then joined with like-minded countries that are understanding the problem and seeking to cooperate to address it. And the cooperation is extremely vital, even if you don't have what you think are the necessary resources. If you reach out, you share the problems, you share identification, challenges, whatever the case may be, you are then stronger in being able to address. It's a truly transnational problem. So I hope that's, in a nutshell, a useful answer.
Thanks, Emma. And it's great to hear that there are already these global alliances to address the issue that also countries with less capacity can benefit from. Thank you very much again to all the participants of the first panel, and also to all of you participants. I see that the Q&A section is lively, so keep on engaging, please. With this, we are now moving to our next part of the dialogue. And we will have with us for that an exciting panel on connecting research and policy. How do we scale up good solutions? This panel is made up of government officials, funding organizations, and heads and action track leaders from different regions of the world. This panel will look at ways to transform food systems with aquatic foods through sustainable, inclusive governance structures and investments. And in particular, our panelists will discuss holistic approaches to solving different issues related to equitable livelihoods along the aquatic food value chains, such as facilitating entrepreneurship and equal access to resources, markets, and technologies for improved efficiency and productivity in aquatic food systems. They will also look at engaging and supporting women and youth to have access to equal opportunities, rights, and knowledge for securing their own lives and livelihoods. And finally, they will look into improving working conditions in fisheries and aquaculture sectors and working conditions for individuals throughout the food systems value chain. So also in this case, please do not forget to send your questions to the panel, and we will address them in the Q&A session that will start shortly after. I will now first invite our panelists for this second panel to a short statement on the key actions to ensure that an aquatic food system approach provides both sustainable, equitable livelihoods as well as food security and nutrition. Let's start with Axel Jacobsen, who is the State Secretary of International Development of the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Axel was a senior policy advisor to Norway's former Minister of Health and Minister of Labour before being elected as State Secretary. In his capacity, he works across low and middle income countries to improve food, nutrition and income security. Axel, the virtual floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for this opportunity to take part in an important dialogue. As you remember, a blue paper commissioned by the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy concludes that given the right conditions, the ocean could provide many times more food than it does today. So aquatic food is crucial in our joint efforts to combat hunger and malnutrition. And aquatic food can be a game changer to reach the SDGs, and in particular SDG 2 on hunger. But to be a game changer for equitable livelihoods and fair employment, we must address the existing inequalities in the aquatic food system. This is, for example, manifested in unfair distribution of commercial fish catches and small-scale fishers' limited political power, particularly women and minority groups. We need to ensure that the aquatic food system leaves no one behind, enables equitable access to resources, supports fair distribution of benefits, and protect the most vulnerable. An important step to achieve this is to develop inclusive, transparent, and comprehensive sustainable ocean plans as promoted by the Ocean Panel. Sustainable ocean management is crucial to ensure that people, notably coastal populations, but also the fisheries and the aquaculture sectors, get their rightful place at the table when access to ocean areas and resources are being decided. Sustainable ocean management is not only about environmental sustainability. That's of course very important, but it's also about an equally important economic and social equity. Addressing inequalities and preventing the widening of inequities are vital aspects of sustainable ocean economy. We need to make sure we leave no one behind in our efforts to reach the sustainable development goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Axel, for reminding us of the recommendations of the high-level panel for sustainable ocean economy. I had the pleasure to be part of one of the blue papers that fed into those recommendations. And addressing inequalities is certainly key in the context of aquatic food systems. And I can only echo to everybody to take up the recommendations that came out of this important work that was led by this high-level panel, and to work on implementing, applying those recommendations that came out of it. And addressing inequalities is also something that our next speaker can certainly speak to. Please welcome Dominic Ziller, Vice President of the International Fund for Agriculture Development, also known as IFAD. Dominic oversees the strategic direction at IFAD, a UN financial institution driving the sustainable, inclusive transformation of rural communities. Dominic's work guides efforts to increase access to resources and markets for improved livelihoods. Dominic, over to you, please.
Many thanks, Nicole, and I'm really honored to be here with Axel and Shakuntala, because I think that the three of us and the three institutions we are representing, the government of Norway, WorldFish and IFAD, we all share the commitment to invest in sustainable aquatic food systems that provide not only better nutrition, but also equitable livelihoods. And you said that IFAD is known for going the last mile to invest in remote rural communities, in small-scale farmers and producers. Rural areas are where poverty and hunger are the most entrenched, and where our investments are targeted because that's our core customers. And these small-scale producers also account for nearly 90% of the workforce in the aquatic sector. So our investments target the most vulnerable here as well. Over the last 40 years, IFAD has supported over 100 of these projects in some 36 countries, and it was an overall investment of 3.4 billion US dollars. So we have quite some experience here. And we also see that more people than ever, 3.3 billion, are depending on fisheries for at least parts of the animal protein in their diets. So this is a sector we cannot ignore if we want, like Axel just said, live up to our promise to leave no one behind. The Food Systems Summit is the opportunity, and I would say in particular in Action Track 4 on equitable livelihoods, the action track where IFAD, by the way, is the UN anchor. It's the opportunity to push forward key actions in the fisheries sector to benefit poor and food insecure small-scale producers. The right investments, in particular in this sector, can have multiple benefits for nutrition, for national food security, and also for sustainable food systems. Let me just mention Eritrea, an IFAD-supported project, is helping inland pastoral communities to raise and consume fish for the first time. It not only diversifies their diets, when we fully scale it up, this initiative could also add 10,000 tons of fish per year to the national food supply, and therefore also increase rural incomes. In Nyeri, mentioned earlier by another panelist, we have another project, $140 million investment of IFAD to do a similar thing. So all in all, we need to discuss how we can make these aquatic food supply chains more sustainable, how we can prevent overfishing, how we can make real progress in partnership with our core customers, the rural people themselves. Many thanks. Back to you, Nicole.
Thank you very much, Dominique, for this. I also have a past in IFAD, so very pleased to have you here. And thanks for reminding of the importance of targeting investments in a way that really is in line with the principles of the SDGs to leave no one behind. Because it is something that really cannot be overemphasized in the context of advancing equitable livelihoods. And thank you also for sharing some very concrete areas for action. Our next and final speaker in the second panel is a recent 2021 World Food Prize laureate, Dr. Shakuntala Tilstedt. And she received this prize for her pioneering science on nutrition, fish, and aquatic food systems. So I take again the opportunity to congratulate you, Shakuntala, for this recognition, which was long overdue. Shakuntala is also the global lead for nutrition and public health at WorldFish. And importantly, she's also the vice chair of Action Track number 4, the focus of our discussion here today. Shakuntala's work on nutrition-sensitive approaches to food systems has improved the food and nutrition security of millions in Asia, Africa, and the Pacific already. And we look forward to hearing your statement in this panel. Glad to have you with us, Shakuntala, please.
Thank you, Nicole, and thank you for having me at this dialogue. It's truly an honor that we have so many joining us today. And I'm really happy to be a panelist together with Axel and Dominique. With less than 10 years to achieving the targets of the Sustainable Development Goals, one of the crucial pathways to get us there is food systems transformation for healthy people and our planet. This transformation must occur across food, land, and water systems, and must be based on a holistic food systems framework, taking into consideration the ways in which we produce, process, distribute, and consume and waste our food. Up till now, and very often, we just begin with production and stop there. Our food systems are not equitable. This inequity cuts across all levels of the food systems, from those producing and all the way to those consuming. Many of these are women, indigenous peoples, and youth, the focus of Action Track 4, and they live in low and middle income countries. They are the first who go hungry, suffer malnutrition, and are the most vulnerable to disruptions, such as the present COVID-19 pandemic, climate shocks, and locust infestations, as we have seen in Africa recently. As an example, 1 in every 2 workers in the aquatic food systems is a woman, And the majority of these women work in the processing, sale, and trade of aquatic foods and products. We know that women are invisible and many times are not represented in the data. So even this number may be a gross underestimation of the contribution of women in aquatic food systems. And we know that this occurs not only in aquatic food systems, but it's the same for women in land-based food systems. For advancing equitable livelihoods, it is crucial that the voices of women are heard, listened to, and acted upon. We must include women, indigenous peoples, and youth in developing the solutions, implementing, assessing, and scaling these solutions to meet their needs and aspirations. Very often, we just stop at the first part, just listening to the women or to the youth or indigenous people, but not taking their voices further to getting the solutions. The United Food Systems Summit 2021 is termed the People's Summit, and therefore it gives us an accessible platform for hearing all voices and acting upon all voices and getting all voices included in the solutions. My work with WorldFish is on nutrition-sensitive approaches to aquatic food systems, and I use multiple entry points in the food systems to increase diet diversity for improved nutrition and health, as well as boost livelihoods and income, especially for women. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you very much for this inspiring contribution, Shakuntala, and for recognizing in particular the role of women also in the aquatic food systems. I think that's something that, again, needs to be mentioned over and over again, because often we have this image of fishing being just a man in a boat, and we forget about all the women that are harvesting, as you can see in my background here. So they are also direct aquatic food producers, but they're also involved in all the activities along the value chain. We now have a little bit of time, about 10 minutes, to kind of go a bit deeper into some of the issues that were addressed by the three panelists. I'm inviting again everybody from the audience to submit in case you have any specific questions to our three panelists. Then please share them in the Q&A section, and we will see how we can address them here. While we wait for that, I wanted to go back maybe to go a bit deeper on some of the aspects that came out in the contributions from our speakers here, in relation to what governance structures and investments are required for better aquatic food systems. And one of the aspects we wanted to address a bit more is how we can facilitate the entrepreneurship and the equal access to resources aspects in this regard. You all in a way addressed it already, but I wanted to kind of go back a little bit more on that, maybe from the perspective of IFAD. Doni, could you maybe give a few more insights on what governance structures and investments are required in order to facilitate entrepreneurship and equal access to resources better?
Yes, happy to do that. I think what is important is to foster a policy dialogue, to facilitate government decisions, and also to put policies in place that trigger public-private producers partnerships. So to do this and also to access productive resources, markets, technology, innovation, we also need to strengthen the fishers' organizations that can gather information, that can distribute information, that can also bring the voice of the small producers to this dialogue with the government. And also for the translation of research into actual investments, I think that is also something very important. And sometimes the access to finance is a problem. So what we also need to see to is that, like we do for micro enterprises, for startups in other agricultural sector, that we make the necessary funding available to startups, to young people and to women in particular who want to build their businesses in agriculture. I think if we put a bit more emphasis on this and mainstream, like IFAD does, nutrition, youth and gender in all our activities, we can progress a lot on this.
Thank you very much. I couldn't agree more. I work primarily in support of small-scale fisheries, so giving voice and really turning the resource users into really active resource stewards and really giving them the agency to really become part of the food system much more than they already are. That's really fundamental. And you may be also aware that one of the Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 14b, specifically calls to provide access for small-scale artisanal fishers to marine resources and markets. So this is very much in line with what you just mentioned, Dominic. So thank you for that. I then would like to also go back a little bit more on the aspects of government structures and investments in order to engage young people and women. And Shakuntala, you spoke already on that, but maybe you can say a little bit more, because I know it's very close to your heart, and it was also something that Dominic already ended on. So maybe you can continue from there. Thank you.
Well, now I'll speak in my role as WorldFish as a researcher. So we know that only 30% of women engaged in research, only 30% of people engaged in research are women. And we do know that we will get better solutions if we have a better playing field of both men and women engaged not only in identifying the problems, but in finding the solutions. And we also do know that in the past, the way we've done this about having more engagement of women having more engagement of other vulnerable groups, indigenous peoples, and now we have a focus on youth, is that we keep them separate and we look at different groups, but we shouldn't be doing that, because in order to advance from where we are, we have to have everyone working together. So yes, we have to get women engaged, but not in a group separate from the men who are already leading and the men who are already ruling. There must be equal space for all in the same group to work together, both in research, as for where I come from, and very important point of the research that I think is important is getting data that's sex disaggregated, age disaggregated, geographical location disaggregated. So I also do think that's extremely important for us to move forward. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, Shakuntala. And what you're saying in terms of having that evidence, no, that informs decision making is certainly fundamental. And we are, despite the recognition of the importance of gender, we still find that the data is not capturing it. And we are actually working as FAO with WorldFish and with Duke University, and Shakuntala is contributing to this also on a study that looks at the contribution of small-scale fisheries to sustainable development. And we're looking exactly at that, no? Trying to fill this information gap, including on gender, but also on nutrition. So it's very timely to have that. I also would like to give an opportunity to Axel to still share some more thoughts on the other aspect, the last aspect that we wanted to look at in this panel, that relates to governance structures and investments to improve working conditions in the aquatic food systems. We heard a lot about the issue of crime already in the first panel. Now, for example, I also combine it with a question that came in the Q&A that asks about an opinion about contract service entrepreneurship, which in a way also has an impact on labor and working conditions. So maybe if you could share some thoughts on improving working conditions in aquatic food systems. from your perspective, Axel?
Thank you for that question. I think that's very important. In this sector, we know that a lot of people are dependent on this sector and get their livelihoods out of it, but we also need that there are some dark side of this of fishery business where we also see modern slavery in action, and we really need to take action against modern slavery in the fishery sector. And actually, Norway have just launched a strategy to combat modern slavery and efforts in the agricultural sector, but also in the fishery sector is key elements of this modern slavery strategy that we are now launching. And next week we will be visiting ILO in Geneva and also launch an international version of this strategy. So I thought I'd just mention that. And the Blue Justice initiative that was mentioned by Emma is a key part of this for combating fishery crimes and also to improve the working conditions for fishermen in vulnerable groups.
Thanks a lot, and it's really interesting to see how the issue of decent work has entered the fisheries domain. And there was a lot of attention in the past on the environmental sustainability, but we can now see so many initiatives that put people at the center and that are balancing the three dimensions of sustainability, taking into account the social and the economic sustainability also in the equation. And I think that's really, really important. So thanks for sharing that. We have a little bit of more time, and I see that there's a question that came in for Shakuntala specifically, saying that in my country, Uganda, fishing is a male-dominated job. Women are still marginalized in the fisheries and in the less lucrative small fisheries. I understand that they are in the less lucrative small fisheries. What would you advise us as strategies to get more and more women involved? I understand this question as being really related to the fishing activity.
Yeah. But I think we go back, I really do think we have to go back to the data and the real data, because even in Uganda and the other countries, Kenya, Tanzania, along Lake Victoria, we see that we do not have the real data for women that are engaged, especially in processing and especially in trade of small-scale fisheries. So I think we have to work with the groups, with the women's association groups. We have to collect data, and we have to work as a collective voice and collective force. Where we stand today, they're invisible, and when they are visible, they are too small and not powerful enough, and therefore they are pushed out. So we have to change that balance of power, of engagement, of equity. But Nicole, I want to go back to one thing, having both Norway, which is a very important nation with respect to aquatic foods, and IFAD, which is the lead, the UN Organization of Action Track 4. Very importantly for us to move forward, it must be the decision of the countries and the governments of countries. And I do think that we have two very strong partners here that can work with governments. If we would work together with governments and get them to put more value and different value on aquatic foods and aquatic food systems, not just the economic value for trade, but for school performance, for intergenerational malnutrition, for livelihoods of women, what that means when you improve incomes of women, what that means in terms of lifting the whole family. If policymakers would learn about and know these very many different multiple values, I do think we can get change at the policy level, which would have great change within the sector and throughout the food systems. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for this call, Shakuntala. And yes, this is really an opportunity. The UN Food Systems Summit is the opportunity to really make that call very strong. And I hope we can contribute to this through this webinar also. Thank you very much. The time for the second panel is also unfortunately over now. So we are moving to the next session, the closing part. Thank you again very much, Shakuntala, Axel, and Dominic, for being part of this panel and for sharing your thoughts, your experiences, and your visions. Now it is my pleasure to invite Michelle Nunn. She, here we go, you have her up here. She is actually the chair of the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit Action Track 4, Advancing Equitable Livelihoods. Michelle is also the president and CEO of CARE, a humanitarian organization that fights global poverty and provides emergency aid. Under her leadership, CARE is working to support 200 million of the world's most vulnerable people to overcome poverty and social injustice by 2030. Unfortunately, today Michelle is unable to make it to our webinar in person, but she has kindly shared a recording of her special message, which we will play now for you.
So I want to start by saying thank you to all of you, especially the Norwegian leadership of the Global Action Network. And of course, my co-conspirator on Action Track 4 of the UN Food Systems Summit, Shakuntala, and our friends at WorldFish. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to be with you live, but I am so grateful to have the opportunity to offer some reflections and encouragement and gratitude. It is truly, let me begin, a privilege to work with Shakuntala on Action Track 4. So very grateful to you for your extraordinary leadership, your partnership, your insights, and to your entire team for the critical leadership role that you're playing, specifically to ensure that our solutions are improving the working and living conditions and upholding the human rights of all of those who are in the fishing sector. I think the world recognizes and has really celebrated your leadership, most recently with the World Food Prize. So congratulations and gratitude to you. The challenges and obstacles to an equitable food system are deeply entrenched. And in fact, we see them, they're staring in our face every day. They're dwindling resources. They are exploitive labor practices. They're climate change, it's hazardous working conditions, human trafficking, child labor. All of these continue to be drivers of inequity that are deepening poverty and really pushing the envelope on political and social disenfranchisement of millions and millions of people around the world. And this is especially and acutely true in the global fishing industry. And it's already, as you know, considered one of the 4 most hazardous and high-risk occupations on Earth. It's internationally recognized, and we know that there's a high degree of exploitive working and living conditions on board fishing vessels, especially for fishing crews on deep sea vessels that are away at sea for months and which often have a high percentage of migrant workers. In some countries, other challenges are worsened by the fuzzy terms of employment. So apart from just occupational safety and health issues, we can see that graduate to almost slave labor type conditions and subhuman living conditions. Many fisheries are self-employed, and so they often fall through the gaps, through the cracks in national labor and social security laws and the regulations that are designed to protect shore workers. And we know that case studies show us that almost as many women are employed in the fishing sector as men, but we don't have enough information about their roles. We don't have enough data around part-time employment, and post-harvest activities is really lacking, something we have to do something about. So given these factors, you can see why we really need a huge international effort to improve working and living conditions in the fishing sector. And it's why I am so enthusiastic about the UN Food System Summit and am truly dedicated, along with all of you, to working with local partners and stakeholders to have a seat at the table and to help us collectively, globally craft lasting solutions. You've already heard from terrific partners during this dialogue. They've addressed solutions. They've brought forward ideas for pulling together rural-urban workers, strengthening women's livelihoods, and amplifying the efforts and the leadership of young entrepreneurs. At CARE, we have seen firsthand how people thrive when we apply local, often very simple solutions that prioritize human dignity. In Egypt, for instance, CARE has connected 2,000 women retailers in the fishing sector to basic saving groups so they could obtain from one another, working together, loans with equipment and new tools and technology. And sometimes those are as simple as, for instance, an ice cooler that enables them to sell their fish throughout the whole day versus just a few precious hours in the morning. I've seen firsthand some of these women who actually worked in very cold rural canals, jeopardizing their health. And something as simple as a protective wetsuit can mean that they can dramatically increase not only their productivity and profit, but also their dignity and their health. So we need to create a lot of examples like this in the world. And I know that we can. We're seeing them. We need to replicate them and scale them. So I'm encouraged by the dialogues that we're having in Action Track 4 for the Food System Summit about holistic solutions across the food system, but in particular with the aquatic food sector. So I'll just close by saying that, simply put, by putting the dignity of those who produce our food first, and by tapping into those locally led solutions, we can really change whole systems. So thank you for this opportunity, for the partnership, for your leadership. Changing whole food systems sometimes can seem impossible. But thanks to all of you, to gatherings like this forum, I think we can see that we can make the impossible possible. So we are literally seeing it being done every day, and we need to just magnify that, amplify it, accelerate it, and scale it. The thoughtful, meaningful work that you're doing to ultimately connect and build fishing supply chains better, sustainably, and resiliently. And we can do that. We can create the world that we seek. Thank you again for your commitment, for your actions, and lifting up your voices together.
I want to thank Michelle and her team on behalf of the Summit's Action Track 4 for sending this recording. I think it was a very powerful message, and there's not much to add. I hope we can all work on the messages that Michelle has conveyed here, which resonate very much with all the contributions we heard today. And I can only echo it, that this call for collaboration in order to really raise awareness and share evidence, generate information and data around the multiple values of aquatic food systems is crucial. And the people focus in that is even more crucial. And I think we all have a good opportunity, a tremendous opportunity actually next year in the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture to do that and to hopefully convey the outcomes of the UN Food System Summit in that regard, to set the pathway for really an inclusive food system for all that includes aquatic food and pays specific attention to those small-scale producers. With that, I will hand over to Stineke to give the closing words, and then just want to briefly thank again all the panelists, all the contributors, and also the audience for being very active, and obviously for the organizers of this event. Over to you, Stineke, for the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nicole, and great summary. Thanks. So on behalf of the Global Action Network, thanks again for joining. It was really, really an interesting and inspiring session. Of course, now the next step will be a solid report, and that will be submitted to the Food System Summit. And then, of course, we encourage you to continue and to make sure aquatic food systems are a visible and integrated part of the upcoming Food System Summit. So not just us, but also you. The network will continue its work. In fall, there will be a network meeting to share achievements so far and also to set a course for further activities to carry out the mission. You are all welcome to join to help identify challenges within the aquatic food systems and also share knowledge on possible solutions. Follow the actions of the Global Action Network website. You can sign up to the network and watch out for emails. Of course, you can also follow the network on Twitter and LinkedIn. Thank you to everyone. A big thank you to Mr. Lele Lelaulu for an excellent and insightful opening remark. I really enjoyed listening to you. Thanks to the panelists for generously sharing your time and expertise. Thanks to the participants, to you for being active, providing important inputs through the chat. And of course, a big thanks to Michelle Noon for her special message, even not being here in person or live. Once again, thanks to Nicole for guiding us through this entire session, and a special thanks to the network task force participants from WorldFish, IFAD, the Netherlands and Norway for preparing the program. The technicalities, always a challenge, but we had a fantastic team at WorldFish and the Norwegian Institute for Marine Research to help us out throughout the session as well. It's been a pleasure working with you today. Thank you very much, and have a very good rest of your day. Ciao, ciao. Bye for now.